joy to be with you this morning. And I think we are just so grateful and thankful for just the invitation to be here and for having a missions moment where you can really focus on and just, I think it just is delightful for my heart for just as we sang, "Oh, sing my soul and tell all he's done." We are so grateful and thankful to share just through your partnership with us some of your fruit, how God is working in Grand Rapids, an hour drive away, and just even throughout the world. So I just love to hear your heart for missions, and so it's so encouraging for our family to come and know, hey, there are people. We're not alone in kingdom work. That there are people with us, and just to hear of so many stories of you guys just all throughout making impact. And the fun thing with Joel is. Joel, and I'll share a little bit more about this later, just with our ministry. Joel really mentored and discipled me, and he's really the reason why we're doing what we're doing right now today. And so I know you guys have been longtime partners with Joel and Sherilyn and their ministry. So I'm going to introduce my family a minute. That's my wife, Jodi. So we're coming up on our 15-year wedding anniversary. And it's our youngest, Caleb. He's our clown. He's our silly one. So he is 9. Our oldest is Micah. He's 12, so right about ready to enter the teenage world. So very exciting for him. I don't know if it'll be really exciting for us as parents. I think it will. I think we got this. And then Noah, I think, headed out to Children's Church. So we're glad to come together as a family. So I wanted to share a little bit. We're with the Navigators, and really they're a nonprofit mission agency based in Colorado, and they have missionaries internationally, and they have a lot of different areas of focus. So they actually started in the Navy, hence the name Navigators, through just a discipleship relationship that turned into a strong movement. And really their mission is to know Christ, make him known, and help others do the same. Is they're really about focusing on relational discipleship and just saying, hey, out of our love and relationship with God, what a great God we serve. How can we not make him known? And then really helping other people, not just stopping and making disciples, but what does it look like to equip them and walk with them to continue to further just that process of disciples who make disciples. And so that's what the Navigators are all about. We're with Navigators I-58, and so there's not a whole bunch of Navigators that are with I-58, but they exist throughout the United States, and really they focus on what does it look like to make a follower of Christ, to make a disciple for those that live in vulnerable communities or impoverished communities, the marginalized and the fatherless. And so I-58 is taken from Isaiah chapter 58. It just shows God's heart for those that need to be comforted, those for the broken, God's heart for the brokenhearted, for the fatherless, etc. And so just God's desire for justice in those situations. And so we're with I-58, and we've also recognized, as we've gotten to know a lot of youth that we work primarily with, really trauma is representative for most of the youth and families that we have the opportunity to work with. So my background is I grew up as a missionary kid in Lima, Peru, and so my mom and dad, I remember going to different churches with them and coming up on stage, and we would sing a song when we were younger, and my kids didn't seem to think that was a great idea. But I spent most of my childhood all the way through high school growing up in Lima, Peru, and my parents started an orphanage with Kids Alive International. And so I got to see their heart for kids that didn't have parents and lived on the streets. And so I think I caught a lot of that. But then I went to college in Chicago for 4 years. And then after college, I went to my home church in Grand Rapids recruited me to be the youth pastor. And I was planning on heading to missions. And I told them I can give you a year working as a junior high youth pastor. And that wound up turning into 16 years of just growing into the youth and family pastor at my home church, Berean. And so they are our sending church as missionaries for our family. So we love being a part of our church family as well. But it's fun going to different churches and just seeing there's just so many great, warm, welcoming families, church families doing really great things in the kingdom. So we joined the Navigators in 2020. Towards the end of 2019, as I had been youth pastor for 16 years at our church, I walked to the window in our youth room with a cup of coffee, and I was just looking out the window over across the parking lot, and across the parking lot is a library. And I saw something that I see almost every single day. There's a bunch of students from Riverside Middle School that would just gather and hang out at the library or hang out at the laundromat so close. And my heart became increasingly burdened with them. And in that moment, backing up, throughout the years, my wife and I decided, let's buy a home in the community right across the street from the church so that we can get to know our neighbors, because we recognized, hey, there's the neighborhood that we live in is a low-income, high poverty neighborhood. So we live actually about a block and a half from Joel and Sherilyn Schaefer. So they're essentially neighbors to us. But as I was looking out, God had been increasingly burdening my heart, our heart, actually Jodi's heart before mine. She was much quicker to see God's calling on our lives. But a verse came to my mind in Matthew 9:36. It says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So if you go to the next slide, these are a lot of the students that I looked out the window and saw that were gathered at the library. And they would hardly ever come into the church, but I would regularly see them outside. And in that moment, God made it clear that he was calling me in a similar fashion to Abraham. Hey, I'm going to a land I will show you. Hey, Jim, I am calling you and your family to reach these kids who are like sheep without a shepherd. They wander and they get into trouble, and everyone is trying to get them off of their property and move on, no trespassing. And, so these are the kids that were causing all sorts of trouble in our neighborhood. And God burdened my heart with them, and he said, go, I want you to reach those students with your family, not really knowing what that looked like. And yet God slowly throughout the process made it clear. And so we joined the Navigators. And through the process of joining the Navigators, we were able to still utilize a lot of the spaces in our church. And so these students right here, I just started volunteering at Riverside Middle School and found out these kids, any invitation they had, they wanted to be there. They were thirsty. So we're drinking some apple cider, but really they were thirsty for any adult to give them any kind of attention. They were starving for any kind of love and affirmation because they weren't getting it at home. They weren't getting it at school. And so they just wanted to be seen and valued and cherished. And so we were doing a Bible study, and we realized they were also thirsty to know who God is. So the couple of the girls on the right, Alana and Angel, after this Bible study, they said, is there any way we can take this Bible home with us? Because we want to know. We promise we'll bring it back. And I was like, please, absolutely. And then later that day, my wife ran into them at the library, and they were reading the Bible together. And so there's just a thirst for knowing, for being in healthy community, and thirst for knowing God. If you go to the next slide, we started to recognize as we started to submerge ourselves more in the community just how deep the need was. So Riverside Middle School is in the worst 3% of middle schools in Michigan currently. So if you look, hey, where do you want to send your kid? You don't necessarily want to send them to Riverside because it can be a dark and discouraging and hopeless place. So it's worse than 3% in terms of they're super high in suspension rates. They're very, very low in the academics, and so it can be just a fairly discouraging place. And yet there is many wonderful teachers, a wonderful principal, and at this time there was no faith-based organizations at Riverside Middle School. And so God really developed a heart for our family to what does it look like to reach Riverside Middle School. And so we really started to recognize three really huge areas of need in their lives. One is no stability. So one of the girls in this picture at this time was on the verge of homelessness. So she lived with 9 siblings in a 2-bedroom apartment a block and a half from our church. And so the apartment was full of mold, and they would describe to me that mice would sometimes run over them at night because it wasn't a super clean spot, probably a little bit challenging with 9 kids and single mom. And so you just realize, well, kids are coming from this setting. no stability in terms of many of them switch schools almost every year because they're moving to a different location in a home. No stability in their homes because many of them, their siblings, are going in and out of incarceration or prison. And so different men coming in and out of their lives, and so there's just not a whole lot of stability in their lives. No mentors. One of the things I learned about Riverside is it is one of the last places that substitute teachers want to go because it's a really rough, challenging school. And because of that, a lot of teachers in their free time, in their free hour, would have to take on, would have another class come in. And one time when I was volunteering, there was a double class because there was no other teacher to cover an empty class. And so one of the teachers was trying to teach English and also had another class come in. And so she's trying to manage 50 inner city youth all together in a class. And so it's, rather than coming alongside and saying, hey, how was your day? It's more putting out fires and trying to address behavior issues. And then at home, many single moms are trying to work 2 jobs and just don't have the time or the energy, and they're just burnt out, and they don't have the capacity to just sit down and say, hey, how was your day? How are you doing, in a proactive sense? And no hope. Many of them have no idea who Jesus is. I was surprised to know that in a Christian country, or in just the Bible Belt, that so many of our neighbors would have no idea who is Jesus. As we've gone through Bible study, some of them are like, wait, who's Noah, or who's Paul? So many people that they're just unfamiliar with. And I think through being hurt so many different ways and different times, they have, one of my mentors highlighted how they experience apathy futility syndrome. What in the world is that? They're so tired of being hurt and so tired of facing rejection that they just stop trying to do anything. And you just almost see, sometimes through middle school, these dreams that they have, the light goes from their eyes of like, I'm just not going to amount to anything. Life is, all there is hurt, and all I have is just disappointment for the rest of my life. I have no, as well as this shame that they experience of, hey, I must not be a valuable person. I don't have value in who I am. And so if you go to the next slide, in the midst of this, what is it, as we've wrestled through, hey, what does it look like to share the hope that we have? I want to share a little bit of our strategy, what this looks like for us as missionaries in the inner city, some similarities, some differences with Joel and Sherilyn and their ministry. But so here's a little bit of our strategy, and I want to share that through the lens of one of our students named Mario. And so you can see on the top left photo, volunteering at Riverside Middle School, we love to go in and just play simple games at breakfast and lunch. So they have free and reduced lunch for every student at Riverside. So many of them, that's where they get breakfast and lunch. And so we come in and play games. So you'd be surprised how many people can gather around a game of Connect 4 and just something fun and enjoyable to do. And so in the bottom right picture, you see Mario. So he mentioned he remembers when he first met me, it was I challenged him to a game of Connect 4, and I'm pretty sure I beat him. But we loved playing Connect 4. And then, so our desire first is just to say, hey, establish relationships. What does it look like for us to pursue and be present in the spaces where the youth are? Recently, I just started coaching third through fifth grade basketball at Palmer Elementary School, so I have no idea what I'm doing there. But they asked, hey, this team can't go on unless we have a coach, and so I just love to develop in those relationships. And Palmer is a feeding school for Riverside, so I'll get to know some of the young men there as they enter Riverside. And then if you go to the next slide, there were no faith-based organizations at Riverside, and through talking with the principal and the administrators, we were able to get Young Life. So you can see on the top right, there is Mario. He's sitting on a little chair, and I'm sitting down right next to him, and he started to come to Young Life through our Connect 4 tournament. Say, hey, you should come to this Young Life program. I'm there, I volunteer. Why don't we go there together? And so he started to hear the gospel. He started to hear of a God who loved him and created him and had a plan for his life, who offered hope and healing in the midst of the brokenness. And so he started coming to that program. And then in the summers, we would invite him, our family, as well as some other students. We got to know, hey, we're going to a friend's house for a bonfire and to go swimming. You want to come with us? And so we started to just share life together. And then as he got to know us more, we said, hey, why don't you come to summer camp? And so that is Mario at summer camp ringing that bell. And so they have a bell at this camp called Kids Across America. And when someone decides, hey, I want to give my life to Christ, they can ring that bell as a public testimony of declaring, hey, I am declaring allegiance with Christ. He's doing a new thing in my heart. And so he got to see and hear from just a village of people saying that follow Christ. And he said, that's absolutely my desire. I want to follow Christ. And so this is a moment just where we got to celebrate with him, where he came to know Christ through some of these relationships. And I have to tell you, some of these it sounds like amazing, but on the way back from camp, as I got to know Mario, he started to share different things. Like they were regularly out of food in their home. And you would walk in and sometimes the smells of just garbage laying everywhere around his home. And then he shared with me, he started to open up as we got to meet and eat together and things like that. I'm pretty excited because this year in 7th grade, I've only been suspended like 17 times because in 6th grade, he was hardly at school from fighting so much. And then he started to share, I don't really like that about myself, that I get so angry. I wanted to receive some sort of, I wanted to be seen, but I'm starting to realize that's not the right way to be seen. And so I don't like that about myself. I want to change, but I don't really know how. And so just talking back and forth with all of these things. And so he had all this anger inside, and he shared about his dad that he didn't really know. And he didn't know if he wanted to ever meet his dad because his dad didn't seem to be all that interested in him. So questioning all of these things. And he lived with his mom and stepdad, and it was just a huge story of brokenness. And so he shared, just through tears at times, how, his house is the house that the police show up at quite often because of domestic dispute. And so just even seeing things that a young kid should never have to see, and just really wrestling with the heaviness of that, of what does that mean for me? What is that? And just having this huge anger, and having it be a drug house where seeing the two providers for him wrestling with addiction to crack cocaine, and just seeing his stepdad in and out of prison and wrestling with that, and his mom with chronic disease and unable to sometimes stand up and walk, and just really wrestling with all of this suffering. And so on the way back from camp, we're driving by, it's a 12-hour drive from this camp, and just he got into it with another kid in the van, and it was just a huge trial on the way back of just trying to figure out how do we get all these kids that are experienced trauma together back. And he got into a huge fight where he and another kid were spitting at each other, shouting, yelling, and they were like they were climbing over the back seats of the van to come to blows. And I was driving, and it was 2 a.m. and raining, and it was construction. I still remember it, and just thinking like, yikes. And I remember my wife sitting in the passenger seat having to climb over while I'm driving to separate and just give him a bear hug and just say, hey, it's going to be okay, and just to climb down and walk through that situation. So you just see just some of this internal battle. This is right after giving his life to Christ. And then I want to share about a follow-up conversation I had with him later. But if you go to the next slide, a lot of what we like to do is help them grow, and put in the word holistically. Just there you see Mario with Jodi. He likes to stop by our house and receive homework help because he's like, hey, I want to do better in school. We talk about practicing driving and all those sort of things, the things that a dad would normally do. You see here he is on the top right, he going on a canoe trip with a number of students. And again, at 2 a.m, huge shouting and screaming from one tent to another. 2 kids were coming to blows. And from 2 a.m. until 4 a.m, myself, Jodi, and 2 other leaders that we had invited to come on this canoe out in the wilderness trip, he continued to share more and more about his story of, hey, the reason that we don't have food in our house is because my stepdad, he sells our food stamps for for drug money. And so that's why, and things just started to come clearer and clearer into picture of like just how many challenges and heaviness he had in his life. And so in the bottom photo there, I'm sharing with, he's had quite a number of his peers go in and out of juvenile detention. And so we were sharing about, as they were facing some discouragement with some heavy things happening among their peers. So we were just talking about where is God in the midst of this and trying to encourage them. And then there came the time for him to enter juvenile detention. And so he was there for 3 months. And so I had a captive audience for 3 months, but got himself into some trouble. And that's where God really started to do a huge work in his life. He got out of juvenile detention and spiraled, and through attempting to take his life, was in the hospital for a while. And he drew this picture, and he gave it to me as a gift. And he said, hey, this picture is me. The light part represents all that is good and the hope that I have. And the dark is the darkness that feels like it's taking over. And right now I think the darkness is winning, and I don't know how to win over the darkness in my life. Can you help me with that? This is so confusing. And he hated the fact that people hurt him. And he came to the conclusion, he recognized, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm hurting others. I'm hurting others, and I'm thinking about hurting them. And I hate that about myself. I don't like that. Who can set me free from this? And so we continue to talk, just go to different verses that talk about this intense spiritual battle for your life and transforming and renewing your mind. This is who you are in Christ. And talking in juvenile detention, hey, did you really mean it when you rang that bell? Yes, absolutely, 100%. I want to follow Jesus, but it's so hard. So just to give you a sense of how many things flow against a lot of these students. If you go to the next slide. We realize that with the amount of kids that we're connected with, there's no way we can go alone. And so this is a highlight. I get to be the Bible lab teacher with another ministry called Bridge Street Ministries. And they now have an everyday after-school program that is Christ-centered, Monday through Friday, where droves of kids from Riverside Middle School, through a 2-year prayer and conversation, they have come to Riverside. And I get to come alongside some of the leaders with Bridge Street Ministries in that program and get to teach the kids Bible. So here they are walking over mouse traps, blindfolded, and talking about trust and the traps that Satan sets for us, and which voice will we listen to, the voice of the shepherd, and things like that. So that's so we've built a deep partnership with Bridge Street Ministries. If you can go to the next slide. This is the high school where Mario currently attends regularly with our high school ministry. We're getting ready to do a high school winter retreat this next weekend, and so here you see so we do a deep partnership with Urban Transformation Ministries. As we got to know some of these kids, we came alongside and asked Joel, hey Joel, can you, and some of the leaders that you have developed and discipled, would you consider taking over and just fully leading a high school Bible study? A high school, right now there isn't any in existence on the northeast side of Grand Rapids, and so through David and Rodella Pfizer, they're on the very far left of the photo. They are deep partners with Jodi and I. Joel and Sherilyn discipled them, and we love to do ministry together and interact together, and so they also are pouring into Mario. If you go to the next slide. Really our desire is not just to pour into these students, but to equip them to be leaders and to disciples. So I took these two young men. The one on the right, he's my assistant basketball coach, Naz, and then that's his older brother, Peanut. So we went, just the two of us, to a conference, and we ran into at that conference two of my former students, Tyrell and Koyana. And it was so cool because I had lost touch with him for like the last year, but God is continuing to do some amazing things in his life. And you go to the next slide. This is Tyrell right here early on in our youth ministry. So he came on a hiking trip, and we're eating some celebratory cake because he gave his life to Christ, and so it was his spiritual birthday. So that's Tyrell. If you go to the next slide, here he was this last October at the conference. He is leading worship for an urban youth ministry conference with tons of different ministries, and many ministries got to pour into him, but he was so excited to say, hey, here's This is the one that helped me know Christ and helped to disciple me and get me to this point to give him a thirst for ministry. And then as I was thinking about that, reflecting on, hey, really the two deepest partners we have in ministry in Grand Rapids, Bridge Street Ministries and Urban Transformation Ministries. If you go to the next slide, there I am early on, 2004, 2005 maybe. There's a young lady named Lydia, so she was in middle school. And if you look up that ladder, you'll see Joel and his wife Sherilyn up there. But they would regularly bring floods of youth. And so so they would pour into these youth and disciple them. And he's like, Jim, you come along, help me in this. Come disciple, teach these students about Christ. And so if you go to the next slide, guess who the director of the after-school program is with Bridge Street Ministries for Riverside? That is Lydia right there. So she recruited me to come in and teach a Bible lab with these students, and there she is. She does a fantastic job of discipling and introducing these kids to Jesus. And so we're like, hey, this is what it's about. If you go to the next slide. This is Champagne. She's a student we had in youth ministry. So if you go to the next slide, there she is at a backyard bonfire. She's on the leadership team with Davian and Rodella Pfizer at the high school ministry. If you go to the next slide, or I think that is actually the last slide. So I'm running a little bit late on time, but I wanted to share just a couple of things in closing, just to give you a taste of ministry, but also just wanted to wrap things up sharing a couple of verses that have been meaningful for me. And 2 Timothy 2:2 is one verse that I wanted to read, and what I love about that is it has four spiritual generations in one verse in 2 Timothy 2:2. And so Paul is writing to Timothy, and he says, "You have heard me teach," that's Paul saying, "things that have been confirmed by many reliable witnesses." So he's talking to Timothy. So Timothy is basically Paul's son in the faith. And he says, "Now teach these truths to other trustworthy people who will be able to pass them on to others." So don't just invest in somebody else and teach them that this is a message that continues. And so I love that about 2 Timothy, just those spiritual generations. And someone once challenged me, because I was more of an addition kind of a person. So if you imagine that if you could fill Michigan Stadium, if someone were an amazing evangelist, and 107,000 people, the whole capacity, every single day was at that stadium, and every single person came to know Christ, it would take 205 years to reach the population of the world, of every single day filling that stadium. But rather, if we're to follow maybe this pattern of multiplication, if one person were to invest in one person and take an entire year pouring into one person, and then the next year, each of those, then you have two. Then those two pour into another person. It would take less than 33 years with that method to reach the entire population of the world for Christ. In closing, my kids love to dig in our back alley, and they've been finding all these broken pieces of pottery. And if I'm honest, a lot of times, hey, to disciple, to share such a powerful message, so many times I feel like those pieces of pottery, like broken, inadequate, and not that valuable, and dirty around the edges when it comes to sharing such a powerful and a great message. And maybe you can relate to that of like, who am I? But 2 Corinthians 4:7 talks about that we are like cracked vessels or cracked pots. It's not us, it's the power within us. It's a pointed to, we are inadequate, but Christ is adequate. And so it's a pointed to, it's the treasure that's within. Yeah, it's through our brokenness. So the later part of the story with Mario is, as we were heading back to camp and there was that huge blow up, I didn't handle things really well in the midst of that. I was stressed, and I kind of lost my attitude at a McDonald's where we were waiting for food, and so I was short with some of the kids, including Mario. And so I had to circle back and apologize to them and say, hey, you know what? What you were doing wasn't right, but the way that I approached you and just demanding obedience, that wasn't fair. That was wrong of me. And so I apologized, and like, no, you don't have to apologize. And like, no, that was wrong of me. And so the very next day, after that huge blow up in the van, Mario came and he said, you know what? You know that thing you did with us in the van? That's what I need to do. Can you teach me how to do that? He was asking, can you teach me how to admit that I was wrong and don't have things together and receive forgiveness from God? And like, is that not what life is about? Is that not what the kingdom is about? Is declaring this? And one thing I love is Navigators verses 2 Timothy 2:2. That's the verse that 4 spiritual generations, a pastor that is mentoring me showed me, Jim, don't forget 2 Timothy 2:1. Paul says, be strong in the grace. Be strong in the grace. The more that I can sit at God's feet and receive forgiveness for my own brokenness, the more that I can extend that to others. And is that not the message that we have? And so thank you for...
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where is Riverside School?
Riverside School is northeast Grand Rapids. It is on Eleanor.
Is that like North Park area?
Close to North Park, yep. It's kind of trending towards North Park. So let me pray for us, and then I heard there were some cookies or some things, some treats in the back, and we want to get to those. And I was told it was okay if I go a little bit over, so thanks for your forgiveness and sharing. Things always take a little bit longer to share than I anticipate. So let me pray for us. Father, thank you for your love for us. We are here broken and need to be rescued, and you have come and rescued us and have declared us righteousness in Christ, and we thank you for that. Pray that you would encourage us at the work that you are doing all throughout, just through Sylvester and so many churches, and thank you for the invitation, for the joy there is in introducing you to others. In your name, amen.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the link on the upper left-hand side of your screen so you can see all of our videos when they come out. Or you can watch last Sunday's sermon by clicking the video link on the bottom left of your screen. From all of us at Sylvester Community Church, thank you and God bless.